Here are the top 10 hikes in the United States. Last year, when I started my journey to all 63 national parks, I knew that I would probably end up visiting every state. One of my favorite things to do while traveling is go for a hike. So naturally, I looked up the top 10 hikes in the country. I noticed right away that I had already done 3 of them. I knew some of them were a little intimidating, but I thought I could give it a try. I made it a goal to finish the other 7 by the end of the year. And if you've been following along, you know I completed the goal at Devil's Bridge in Arizona. And at that point, I planned to make a whole video to show you all 10 hikes, and I never did. And you deserve the video, so here it is. Now this list is from alltrails.com. People who hike add reviews, and that's what makes the listing. The list is always changing, so I saved this in April of last year so that I had something solid to work from. These are definitely the most popular hikes from the most popular places, so if you're heading out to do them, keep that in mind. If it's your first time here, my name is Laura, and I love sharing my journey from the road. I've been home for a little bit recovering from RAGBRAI, but I'm getting ready to head out on an amazing fall trip. This is a destination that not everyone picks, so I'm very excited to share it. Take a second to subscribe, hit that bell notification button, that way you won't miss it. Okay, the first hike on the list is Vernal Falls to Nevada Falls in Yosemite National Park. This is the first hike I ever completed on this list. In 2017, I headed out on my first ever backpacking trip. I flew to Fresno, rented a car, and drove to Yosemite. Now, I did return this year, and to be honest, this first trip in 2017 is the reason I have such a soft spot for this national park. It was the first time I ever put my backpack on and headed out into the wilderness with just the things on my back to survive. My plan was to spend the first night in Yosemite Valley, hike up to Little Yosemite Valley, and then conquer Cloud's Rest. I chose this over Half Dome because the cables are a little intimidating, and from Cloud's Rest you get this view. Luckily, this route takes the Mist Trail, which connects Vernal and Nevada Falls. This is a hike that you can accomplish in one day from Yosemite Valley. It's gonna be a long day, but your reward will be these views. If you're in Yosemite Valley and you want to escape the crowds, this is the best option. Number 9 on the list is the hike to Lake 22 in Washington. The only reason I did this hike is because it was number 9 on the list, and it was easily one of my favorite hikes over the past year. It was both challenging and exciting. There was a huge change in terrain from where I parked the car to where I finished the hike. There were rocks, it was steep but not too steep, and I was rewarded with this amazing view. There's so many amazing hikes in Washington. I did this one because it's on the list, and luckily it got me out there and got me hiking. It was so worth it. Before we go on to number 8, obviously all of this is based on my opinion. Let me know in the comments if you've ever done any of these hikes and what you thought along the way. Okay, number 8 is Delicate Arch in Arches National Park. Obviously, this is the most popular hike in Arches. I was so lucky to be there in August. It was hot, but I can't imagine the crowds when it's cooler. This is such an iconic hike that for the longest time, this arch was actually featured on the Utah license plate. Arches National Park is home to thousands of arches. Most of them you stand looking up, but Delicate Arch is perched on a ledge where you're able to hike above it and actually get this view of it next to the basin with the landscape in the distance. And that's easily why it stands alone, and it's such an important destination. It would be beautiful at sunset, and people hike there for sunrise. This does go along a ledge, so be careful if you're hiking in the dark, and definitely take a headlamp. It's steep at the beginning, but becomes more gradual at the end. Don't skip this one if you're in Arches. Number 7 is Mount Lafayette and Franconia Ridge in the White Mountains. In 2019, I went on a huge solo trip across the East Coast, with the ending destination being the White Mountains. I already knew then that I needed to hike Franconia Ridge. It's such a big tourist destination that they actually had an aid station set up at the base to warn everybody to take warm clothes and take plenty of water, because a lot of hikers do it even if they don't have a ton of experience. The reason they do is because of this view. I was able to get these views before the clouds rolled in over Mount Lafayette. There are definitely slippery spots, so take shoes with good traction. And the White Mountains is known for having lodges in the mountains, so there is a resting point along the way. Number 6 is the hike to Mount Leconte in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. While I was in the Smokies, I stayed an extra day to do this hike to Mount Leconte. It offers some of the best views of the Smoky Mountains. There is a lodge at Mount Leconte, and people do hike and stay there overnight. It's definitely an option if you plan ahead enough. The best part is when you're hiking, you can still stop there and use the outhouses and refill your water. There's 3 things to remember about this hike. First of all, I underestimated the elevation change, so keep that in mind when you start out. It has a blind peak. So as you're hiking up, you might see things in the distance that you think you're going to, but there's definitely a corner that you turn where you actually see the ridge that you walk up on. Don't give up and keep hiking. And then the third is that because it's a blind peak, the peak of Mount Leconte is past the lodge. There's a huge rock cairn at the actual top, and that's the distance of the hike. But I recommend continuing on to the viewpoint, because that's when the trees will open up and you'll actually get this view that you've been working for. I stopped there, had lunch, and then hiked back down. Number 5 is the Cathedral Rock Trail near Sedona. I was so happy that my mom was able to join me on my trip to Sedona. The first hike we had planned was Cathedral Rocks. I did, however, forget to calculate when the sun went down. So we arrived at Cathedral Rocks and struggled so hard to find parking. Luckily, a spot opened up and we started our hike. This is a steep, rocky climb, and there's definitely some sketchy parts that you kind of have to work your way through. This is such a beautiful spot for sunset. There were even people taking wedding pictures. I was so happy that a group next to me actually stopped and offered to take these pictures, which are some of my favorite hiking pictures of the year. Number 4 is the Navajo Loop at Bryce Canyon National Park. When I was at Bryce Canyon National Park, it was such a great time of the year because it actually started snowing while I was there. It was also really windy, but this was such an adventure. I had seen pictures of Bryce Canyon, but I just didn't understand the hoodoos and the atmosphere that they would create. I chose to start at the Queen's Garden Trail, go down into the amphitheater, and up the Navajo Loop. Unfortunately, when I was there, the Wall Street section was closed. The Wall Street section is the most famous section of this hike, but I was able to come up the Navajo section, which is right next to it. It was amazing to see both and to get the feeling of just being so small next to the rocks and the pine trees. It was beautiful. So many people go to Arches or Zion. Don't skip Bryce Canyon. Number 3 is the Emerald Lake hike in Rocky Mountain National Park. This hike is one of the first 10 videos I ever posted to YouTube. In the summer of 2020, Courtney and I went out to Denver. One of the stops on our list was Rocky Mountain National Park. Neither of us had been there before, and I picked the hike to Emerald Lake as our destination. Along the way, you pass Bear Lake and Dream Lake and eventually reach Emerald Lake. It's such a popular hike that you now need a reservation, but it is so worth the effort to get there. Number 2 on the list is Devil's Bridge in Sedona, Arizona. I thought because this was the most popular hike in Sedona that we should actually take the long route. So my mom and I started out early in the morning and definitely took the scenic trail to get there, but the buildup was worth it. There's certainly some steep sections, but if you take your time and work with everybody along the way, you'll definitely get there. In person, I feel like the bridge was much wider than I expected, and there's probably going to be a line. So as long as you're patient, you'll be able to walk out onto the bridge and the people behind you can take your picture, and you'll end up with the great views like this. After going through the other 9 hikes, I'm curious if you've been able to guess the number 1 spot. It is, of course, Angel's Landing in Zion National Park. This was the most intimidating hike on the list. I had been to Zion before this year. I knew what this hike looked like. I knew its reputation with the height and the chains and the crowds, and I didn't know if it was something I actually wanted to do. And it really came down to the fact that I had been doing other hikes and I was very confident in my abilities to get up there. I also gave myself so many outs for that day. If I felt unsafe at any point, I knew I was going to turn around. And I only reached that point one time before the final stretch to the top. And my fear was how I was going to get down. I didn't want that fear to stand in my way. So I pushed on and made it to the top of Angel's Landing. It was such a beautiful experience. My hike up was mostly by myself. It wasn't overly crowded, and I really felt that accomplishment at the top. It was a beautiful day, and you could see for miles. Eventually, I did make my way down. I ended up linking up with a few other groups of hikers so that I'd actually have people to kind of follow on the way down. There was conversation the whole time, and it completely took away my fear of getting down. After completing it, I can definitely see why Angel's Landing tops the list as the best hike in the country. Starting this year, they do have a reservation system, so make sure that you sign up if you're planning to go do it. Of course, it's impossible to pick a favorite, but I think Angel's Landing is definitely deserving of the top spot. Let me know in the comments which one you think deserves to be the #1 hike. Every hike from this list that I have on my channel is linked in the description, so if you want to see more, check it out. I'm so happy I finally got this video out to you. I'm always looking for the next big adventure, so let me know which trail I should head to next.